With my method, you can definitely become fluent in English in Japan only by yourself, even if you are raising a newborn. Hi everyone! Today, I'm gonna talk about how I learned to speak English over myself in Japan. I started learning English conversation when I was 35 years old. And back then, my English was like, my name is Hiro, this is a pen. I could understand just these sentences. This was the best I could do. My school English grades were a series of failing marks. I somehow managed to convince my teachers to let me retake the exams, and I barely avoided repeating the year again and again. But after my children were born, I thought about I want to be able to teach them something, even just one thing. I want to be able to take pride in something, even just one thing. With this in mind, I began learning English while working full-time, while taking care of a 2-year-old and newborn, without studying abroad or taking formal classes. I surpassed a TOEIC score of 900 in 5 months, and 2 months later, I passed the 18th grade pre-1. In the first place, I thought about why I can't speak English. Then I thought about how I'll be able to speak English. And after thorough consideration, I got a completely different approach from Japanese conventional study method, and it's the best way to learn English. Today, I'm gonna share it with you. With my method, you can definitely become fluent in English in Japan only by yourself, even if you're raising a newborn. And also, I'll continue to share more and more methods to improve your English through self-study in Japan. So if you have the slightest interest, please subscribe to my channel. Basically, there are only 3 things that you need to be able to speak English: vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. Based on my experience, if you practice these 3 things to a certain level, you'll definitely be able to speak English. So now, I'll introduce the most effective study method that I personally practice for each. Out of the 3, the most important thing is vocabulary. I can say now, but the biggest reason I couldn't speak English was because I was using the wrong method to study vocabulary. When I was a student, I used this DO 3.0. Then I memorized words. Individual means 個人, superstition means 迷信, environment means 環境, like this. I tried to memorize just the meanings of the words. I didn't prioritize the words, so I'd just go through the vocabulary book a couple of times. I also just tried to write down the words to memorize them. My main goal was to memorize only the meanings of the words. That's the method I used for studying vocabulary at the time. However, to become able to speak English, you need a method for learning words that specifically helps you become able to speak English. To be more specific, in order to become able to speak English, it's not enough to just understand the meanings of the words. You need to increase your repertoire of words that you can actually use in real conversations. The only thing I did for that purpose was simply redoing the DO 3.0. I changed my study method and gave it another try. I focused on 3 new points: memorizing the pronunciation, making sure the image of words, learning how to use them. First, memorizing the pronunciation is really important because if you don't understand the sound, you can't pronounce it correctly and you won't be able to hear the words. Despite this, when I was a student, I used to downplay the importance of sounds, thinking that as long as I understood the meaning, it was enough. So I uploaded the DO audio on iTunes and I listened to it on my smartphone. Nowadays, you can listen to DO audio in a smartphone app called ABC. I corrected the incorrect English sounds in my brain. For example, this word, catastrophe. When I was a student, like this, catastrophe. Because I was memorizing it in this way, I couldn't possibly use it in real conversations, and there was no way I could understand it in listening exercises. So I memorized the correct sound like catastrophe. I wrote in the vocabulary book like this, making sure the image of words. This greatly contributed to developing the so-called English brain. English brain, in a sense, refers to a mind that can think in English without relying on Japanese, right? Memorizing through visualization was perfect for this. For example, in DUO, there is a word appliance, which means 電化製品 in Japanese. However, I found it difficult to memorize it because I could never imagine the form of it. That's when memorizing the images comes in handy. If you type appliance in the Google image search, you instantly get results like this. For example, this image makes it really easy to understand, right? Appliance is a word like this. It's much easier and memorable compared to just memorizing the Japanese meanings. Learning how to use them. This is really important for becoming able to speak English. Seriously, people who can speak English have never done this, but the method is super simple. By looking at example sentences on Duo, you can learn how a word is used in different contexts and what other words it is used with. Just remember that. For example, look at the word depend in Duo. It means 頼る、何々次第である in Japanese. The good thing about Duo is that it shows how words like depend and on are used together. And it also provides example sentences. If you feel that Duo's example sentences are not enough, you can also search for depend and examples on Google or ChatGPT. You'll find sentences like children depend on their parents, it will depend on techniques, and it depends. It shows that after depend on, you can use not only people, but also things or abstract concepts. You can also use depend on its own. This way, you can learn how to use words in different contexts. By doing so, for example, when you want to say 内容による in English, it depends on its content will come to mind more easily in the moment. Let me clarify something that many people misunderstand here. It's about the definition of memorizing a word. Many people define learning a new English word as seeing it, thinking about it, and then the meaning coming to mind, right? This doesn't mean you've actually learned the word. It's just you have an experience that you've seen before. If you try to listen to a word in a real conversation, then stop to think about it until the meaning comes to mind. You won't be able to keep up with the conversation. That's why you cannot speak English, right? So, I've been dividing English words into 4 levels while learning. Level 1 is memorizing it now. Level 2 is after consideration, its meaning comes out. Level 3 is coming out its meaning instantly. Level 4 is I can speak in real conversation or practice by talking to myself. All the words you see for the first time start with at level 1. Then, if you think about it, the meaning will come to you. You can move the word to level 2. When the meaning comes to you in an instant, it's a level 3. Once you can use it in real conversations or practice by talking to myself, the word is at level 4, like this. I've been using friction markers to mark words that I want to memorize. Of course, level 1 should be prioritized rather than level 2. Then level 3 should be prioritized rather than level 4. So I use the most amount of time on level 1. If you do same steps, you can speak the words in real conversation. Next, I'm gonna talk about the grammar. I got the hang of grammar all at once after improving my traditional study methods. My old study method was just memorization. I used to push myself through a grammar book, memorize everything, answer tests in my high school, and consider it a success. But with that approach, I realized I wouldn't be able to use grammar in real conversation for the rest of my life. To use grammar in English conversations, I had to adopt a study method specifically designed for using grammar in practice. If you were to compare it to tennis, the traditional study method is like knowing the rules of tennis, so even if you step onto the tennis court, you never really play. The same goes for English. I didn't just focus on memorization. I incorporated study method to use the grammar in conversations. I saw results quickly after incorporating study method for practical use. It was really simple. Just 2 things. The first thing is mastering the grammar book, 聞く英文法. Not only memorizing the grammar book, but I consciously focused on 2 things to make it usable. Number 1 is quickly creating simple English sentences. Number 2 is gradually increasing the difficulty level. For instance, with the grammar rule, not only A but also B from 聞く英文法, I didn't just understand and memorize it. I practiced by creating sentences to make sure I could actually use it in context. Like, I like not only orange juice but also apple juice. I play not only tennis but also baseball. I've been to not only Hokkaido but also Okinawa. In actual conversation, speed is crucial, so I practiced composing simple English sentences as quickly as possible. Of course, I couldn't do it right away. I practiced over and over, gradually increasing the speed. And once I got the hang of creating simple English sentences quickly, I moved on to gradually making more complex sentences. For example, I like not only orange juice, but also apple juice because both are sweet and delicious, like this. The key is to combine the grammar rules you've learned so far. The second thing is after mastering the grammar book, I continue learning English grammar through practical usage. After realizing there are things I couldn't express in solo conversations or real-life English interactions, I turned to ChatGPT to enhance my language skills. For example, 留学したからといって必ずしも英語を話せるようになるわけではない。If I couldn't say this sentence in English, 留学したからといって必ずしも英語を話せるようになるわけではない。この日本語を日常的にネイティブが使う自然な英語にしてください。I wrote prompts like this. Thus, ChatGPT would answer that Just because you studied abroad doesn't necessarily mean you automatically become fluent in English. The key here is that memorizing this English word for word reduces the effectiveness of your learning by half. When you understand the sentence, you can see that there is a syntax like just because SV doesn't mean SV. I use this syntax to further express my thoughts in English. For instance, 女性だからといって料理がうまい必要はない。Just because someone is a woman doesn't mean she has to be good at cooking. お金持ちだからといって悪いことをしているとは限らない。Just because someone is wealthy doesn't necessarily mean they are doing something wrong. 温暖化が進んでいるからといって地球の未来が絶望的とは限らない。Just because global warming is advancing doesn't mean the future of the earth is necessarily hopeless. Plus, I continue to make associated English sentences like just because global warming is advancing doesn't mean the future of the earth is necessarily hopeless. The reason that tropical rainforests are the most biodiverse and global warming is causing an expansion of tropical regions. In this way, I asked ChatGPT about the English sentences I couldn't express. After mastering the fundamentals of English grammar through Kick-A Bunpo, I proceeded to learn grammar through practical experience like this. I find what I've learned through practical experience sticks in my memory faster and more enduringly. I believe it's because I invest my feelings. However, if I were to research everything I wanted to express, there wouldn't be enough time no matter how much I had. So prioritizing getting to a level where I can effectively use one grammar book takes precedence. Finally, it all comes down to pronunciation. I used to think like this back in the day. Pronunciation won't improve unless you go abroad. So I used to believe that only returnees, people who studied abroad, or those living overseas could have native-like pronunciation. But I can say for sure that was just an illusion. With the right practice, your pronunciation will definitely improve. The practice that I've been doing is called shadowing. When you go to the bookstore, you'll find plenty of pronunciation books, but what I used were audio materials in the specific English field I wanted to improve. For instance, if you want to improve your TOEIC scores, use the official TOEIC practice materials. If you are aiming for the Eiken test, go through past Eiken exam questions. And if you want to enhance your conversation English, use dramas or movies on YouTube or subscription services like Netflix. Learning English, whether it's grammar, vocabulary, or pronunciation, doesn't have to cost much. To improve my English pronunciation, I did only 2 steps. Number 1 is picking the materials you need or enjoy, like videos, movies, or dramas. Number 2 is shadowing. In the end, good pronunciation means how well you can pronounce like native speakers. Shadowing is really effective because it involves mimicking the pronunciation of native speakers. But you must realize that it's really challenging at first. Actually, when I started doing it, it was so tough that I felt like crying. So what I recommend everyone do is to gradually work up, taking it step by step. What I did was to take the English sentences I wanted to shadow and gradually increase the challenge through intensive reading, reading aloud, overlapping, then finally shadowing. Like grammar study, gradually increasing the difficulty is an effective approach to improving pronunciation. There's no secret trick to becoming fluent overnight. Breaking it down, intensive reading means understanding every bit, clearing up any grammar or vocabulary doubts so you instantly grasp the meaning when you see the English sentence. Reading aloud means speaking the words out loud. To do this, it's essential to have a grasp of basic pronunciation when practicing vocabulary and grammar. Basic pronunciation here refers to pronouncing words as part of pronunciation symbols. If you search for English pronunciation symbols online and pick a free site with audio spending around 5 minutes a day can help you master it in about 2 weeks. The next step after reading aloud is overlapping. It's a practice where you pronounce words by layering your voice over native speech, just a step before shadowing. Overlapping is easier than shadowing because it's okay to do it while looking at the English text. And finally, the last step is shadowing. Shadowing involves training by pronouncing words in sync with the native speaker's voice without looking at the English text. Understanding the meaning right away can be tough, so start with shadowing just the sound at first. Afterward, try shadowing while also understanding the meaning. In this way, I gradually increase the difficulty. When shadowing, you might encounter pronunciations that you can't understand. Understanding sound changes will help you overcome this. Sound changes, for instance, water might sound like water. You can learn this by searching for English sound changes on free website. I learned pronunciation gradually through steps like these. Pronunciation learning shows results more quickly compared to grammar and vocabulary study. The reason is that once you learn a single sound, it can be applied to many words. For instance, take the T sound in water we discussed earlier. The T sound changes to something closer to la or da. This is seen in other words like better, turning into better, little, becoming little, and let it go, changing to let it go. Once you can produce one sound like this, you can apply it to many words. In Japan, people who can speak English are in the minority. That's because in schools, while you learn grammar and vocabulary, you often don't reach the stage of actual usage of English. And many Japanese people believe that you can't speak English unless you study abroad. But I can say with confidence that you never need to study abroad to master English. With a few high-quality reference books and a smartphone with internet access, you can become fluent in English. At 35 years old, working full-time, raising a newborn and a 2-year-old, I undertook self-study to relearn English. Within a year, I successfully mastered conversational English like this. You can definitely do it too. So let's learn English together to achieve your goals. Thank you for watching my video. Bye bye.